Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next webinar in the Adobe FrameMaker Essentials webinar series. I am Barb Binder, and I'll be your host for the next hour. Our topic for today is on precision editing with Find and Change. Very briefly, here is my background. I'm the owner and lead instructor at Rocky Mountain Training. We offer training classes on FrameMaker and other Adobe applications. I'm also an Adobe community expert, which means I answer questions on the community forums. And I was an Adobe certified instructor for the duration of that program. It actually ended in 2023, but I'm still here offering training classes and here to answer your questions. If you would like to stay in touch after the webinar, feel free to grab a screenshot of this page. It has my email if you want to reach out. It has the website, so if you're looking for training classes or other services that we offer, you can find it all on the RockyMountainTraining.com website. There's also a blog on the website, and I use that blog to post the questions that students ask me after they attend training with their answers, and there's years of Adobe FrameMaker content on that blog. I'm less active there these days because I'm more active on the community forums. If you have a question about FrameMaker, the single quickest way to get an answer is to go to community.adobe.com, scroll down to find the FrameMaker link, and then click on FrameMaker and Discussions. You'll find years and years of questions and answers there, and you have access to the community experts like me who will be on there ready to answer your every question. It's definitely the quickest way to get an answer. And because it's community supported, sometimes several of us will answer a question and give you the more in-depth answer than you get from asking one of us. It's a great resource for you. With that, let's get into the webinar. Okay, I know what you're thinking. What is Barb going to talk about for an hour about Find and Change? I understand that concern, and if you even showed up, I'm proud of you for coming because you're thinking maybe I do have something important to share, and I think I do. I think I have some things that a lot of you haven't gotten into yet. But as a career instructor, and I've taught FrameMaker for many, many years, along with other page layout programs, I often quiz my students when I get to the editing part of the class. How many of you use spell check? Unanimous. Everyone spell checks. They all know how to spell check in any software application. You might have a little bit to share about how spell check works in a particular program, but they know how to spell check. I'm always surprised at people who say they've never used Find and Change, ever. Now, it's a small minority. It's probably maybe 25%, 25 to 30% of my students that will tell me they've never used it. So most students know about Find and Change. You're probably mostly in that category. But for those of you who have never used Find and Change, it allows you to look for some content and change it. You find the content, you change it. That's the term Find and Change. Some programs call it search and replace, or they mix and match those four words: find, search, change, replace. Basically, it's the same feature. It's part of most software applications. And when it comes to editing documents, I think it's one of our most important tools. Yes, spell check super important, but Find and Change helps you fix documents very quickly. So I want to go through 4 different topics in this webinar. I'll start at the very beginning, what you mostly already know how to do. Use Find to find something and then change it to something else. But FrameMaker has a lot of variations on Find and Change that you might have overlooked. I want to give you some examples of other ways of using Find and Change besides searching for a text string and changing it to a different text string. I also want to take you to REGEX. So we'll take a quick look at Wildcards on the way there. REGEX is using Wildcards, but more powerfully. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. Just want to address that it's in that dialog box. And then focus on how REGEX, which is pattern-based Find and Change, can help you edit a document. Before we start, there are a few things you want to know about how Find and Change works in FrameMaker. If you're in a single file and your cursor is at some random spot and you decide to initiate a find or a Find and Change activity, FrameMaker is going to search from that point to the end of the document, head back to the beginning, and then come back to where you started. So it doesn't start at the beginning, it starts at your cursor position and wraps all the way through. If you're in a book, it starts with the document that you have active and then goes to the other files in the book. And in a book find and change, if FrameMaker can't open up a chapter for some reason, maybe it's missing fonts, maybe it has some other error associated with it, it won't search that document. You should be aware of that. You'll see that it didn't because there's a book error log that will open up and it will tell you that it couldn't get to one or more of your files. A quick way to circumvent that is to open up all the files in the book before you do a global find and change. It's not a bad idea anyway, because we as humans can mess things up. And if you have find and change activity that you're performing in a book and the files are closed and you perform it, you cannot undo the changes in the closed files. If the files are open when you do it, you can close without saving or hit undo and get back to where you were if you've made a big mistake. How do I know that? Because I've made huge mistakes in my life. So I'm definitely aware of that. Now, if you're in a single document again, but you have multiple flows, flow A, flow B, flow C, Find is going to start in the active flow and then search flow by flow by flow. If you're watching Find and Change, you might be thinking it's skipping around in some weird random way. That's because it's going through one flow and then the next and then the next. And finally, and this is something I didn't understand for a while, FrameMaker is only going to search the type of page you're on. So if you're on body pages, when you initiate a find and change, it's going to search the body pages for that topic you're looking for. Master pages only search on master pages, and if you're on reference pages, it's only searching the reference pages. These are good things to understand before you get too far into this. So I want to begin by opening up the Find Change panel with you, taking a quick look at what's in there so you can see how it's organized. I want to show you a Find Text activity, a Find and Change activity. I expect most of you know how to do this and you're doing it already, but I want to provide the foundation for what I'm going to go into after this. Let's go to FrameMaker and take a look. Okay, so here we are in FrameMaker, and I want to begin by opening up the Find Change panel. It's over in my dock on the right, but if it's not in your dock, just go to the Edit menu and choose Find and Change. And mine open up from over here. In the future, I can just click the name to open it up and click it to close it. The important components of the Find Change panel, one is the Find section. That's what you're looking for. The second part is the change, what you're doing when you get there. The range that you're searching is listed in the Look-in section down near the bottom. Book is great because I don't have a book open, but you can search an entire book if you have a book open when you initiate the search. Map is part of structured FrameMaker. I'm in unstructured, so it's not available. Right now, I can either search the entire open document or a selection within the document. And the action occurs by clicking one of the buttons along the bottom row. This will locate something. Find will locate whatever you're asking it to locate. Change can make it do something different. Change and Find speeds up those two buttons. You can change what you found and then find the next one. And then Change All does the entire thing. You can undo any of these. There are certain things in FrameMaker you can't undo. Happy to say it's not this unless you're doing it at the book level with all the files closed. That's why I said earlier, have your files open if you're unsure what you're doing. Because if the book files are closed and you run a book find and change, that's permanent. Okay, so the first thing I want to point out that I use this for is when I get lost in a document that I'm editing. Frequently, when I send a file back for edits, content gets rearranged and gets moved from one place to another. And through the reflow, sometimes I can't figure out where the paragraph is that has a typo that I'm supposed to fix. And so a technique that I use is I'll type in the first few words of a paragraph I'm looking for and let FrameMaker either search the document or the entire book to help me figure out where that section ended up. So I'm going to type in the first few words of a paragraph in here, and I'm going to click Find. And sometimes I use it just for that alone. I'm done. I close it, and then I start entering edits again. That's the first basic usage. Now let me show you how to use this for Find and Change. I'd like you to notice I have the word vehicle appearing 4 times in these 2 paragraphs, 1, 2. 3, 4, and randomly, sometimes it's an uppercase V and sometimes it's a lowercase v. That could be on purpose because of how it's being used in the sentences. In this case, it's very random, so I can talk about the case. But you can see there's a variety of different case situations here. And let's say I want to find the word vehicle and make it say spaceship. So I would type in the word vehicle and I can hit, let's go to the beginning of that section. I can hit find and it's going to match each occurrence of vehicle, not caring what case I'm using. I typed lower, so if I hit find, it's going to find vehicle whether or not it's uppercase or lowercase. If it matters to me if it's uppercase or lowercase, that's what the checkbox does for consider case. So if I click find, it will find the lowercase occurrences, but not the uppercase occurrences. It's skipping those. That can be helpful to understand. And let's say that I want to change it from vehicle to spaceship, and I want to change all 4 of them. In that case, I should disable consider case. But maybe the case was actually done on purpose and not randomly to teach how case works, and I want to maintain the case as I'm going. That's going to happen down here in the change area. Clone case is going to look at the case of the existing word and clone it when the new word shows up. So I'll click find, and it's going to find the lowercase occurrence of vehicle, and I'll change it, and it's going to be lowercase. I'll click find, it finds the capitalized version of vehicle, and I'll change it, and I've got a capital S in spaceship. The third button along the bottom is a little bit quicker. I don't have very many more to do, so it's not too exciting, but I want this one to say spaceship, so I can change this and find the next one. Let's say that's the last one in here. I'll just change it again. But that's how those buttons work. Now, if you realize they're all supposed to be lowercase and you didn't want anything to be uppercase, we could just turn off clone case. And then I'm going to copy spaceship since I'm not a great typist when people are watching. I'll paste it in. And I'm then going to just select these 2 paragraphs because I don't want to scroll to the other occurrences of these words elsewhere in the document. And I'll tell it to search the selection and change all of those to lowercase. With consider case and clone case off, everything will be lowercase when it finishes. It said it found 4, and sure enough, it's all good. So that's a basic find and a basic find and change. You understand how the scope works for what it's looking within, and you can see how those buttons work. I'm going to put it back to document before I forget. The other thing I want to point out is that unnamed query list that was on the slide, but I don't think I actually mentioned it out loud. The list where I'm typing in spaceship remembers the last things we've looked for, the last 10. If you do more than 10 searches, it'll drop off the back. But you've got 1 for find and 1 for change, or remember what you did. And that can be useful if you're setting up complicated queries and you want to keep setting them up again. But you can't actually physically save them. It's just the last 10. And to me, that becomes problematic. And I'll show you why a little bit later in here. But for now, I want you to know that they're there. And now you've got the basics on find and change. Oh, wait, I tried to forget 2 of these checkboxes. I want to make sure you also notice whole word and find backward. When you enable whole word, you're finding letters that appear as a single word, surrounded by punctuation or spaces or at the beginning of a paragraph. For example, if you're searching for the word men with whole word on, it's only going to match MEN, men. If it's off, it could match those 3 letters in the word department, as an example. That's whole word. And then find backward just means you start at the cursor position and it goes backwards through the document to the beginning, starts at the end, and goes back to your cursor position. Now you have the basics of find and change. And with those basics out of the way, let's move into some of the more interesting variations on a simple search. There is a menu in the Find and Change panel that allows you to pick additional find options. For example, you can search for cross-references in variables and markers and footnotes and tables and text insets and more. Those can be helpful if you haven't seen that yet. There are 2 features that are new to FrameMaker 2022. That's the current version as of this recording, that even a longtime user who's good with find and change might have overlooked because it's a long menu and they're buried in there. So I want to show you both of those. And then I want to show you some productivity find and change features with formatting and styles and overrides, and by pasting is actually more formatting. Let's take a look. So at the very top of the panel, there's a drop-down menu. You'll see the word find and the word text. And for most people who don't do much in here, they leave it at text. They're just looking for text all the time, changing to other text. But this is a menu, so if I click it, it'll open up, and you can see it's got quite a lot of content in here. And there are some things in here I find more useful than others. For example, you can look for cross references. You can look for a specific cross reference, a certain cross reference format, or unresolved cross references. That's great, and I used to use it a lot. But current FrameMaker has the option to view all the cross references in a list with a green X if they're good and a red X if they're unresolved. I tend to use this list now and not find and change. Another one like that is markers. You can find different markers in here, but we also have the markers panel, and that's going to list all the markers in a file. Now, one of the new features I mentioned is actually in marker. It's marker of text. I'll show you how that works. That is super useful if you need to change it. But just finding markers in general, I think it's quicker using the panels. And variables has another feature in 2022 that I hope you know about, but just in case you missed, you can go to preferences, edit menu preferences, and variables, and then you can highlight the variables in a document. In older versions before 2022, we had to know where the variables were to be able to locate them and work with them because they just disappeared into the background. Now that we can highlight them, they're easy to locate just by scanning. So to me, those three are going to be less important with 2022 moving forward. But there are other things in here I do want to point out. For example, we can look for, what am I looking for in here? The first footnote. If I click on footnote, and I do have some footnotes in here, I can choose find and start locating the footnotes in the document. That can be very helpful. Another option in this drop-down list is to look for tables. I've got a table in this document, and we could look for any table or a table with a specific style assigned. I'll just say table any and find. I think of this as being very similar to what I talked about at the very beginning of the simple searches, where I might get lost in a document because things reflowed and I can't figure out where the paragraph is I need to edit. I can use some of these commands to find something I'm looking for. And then when I get there, I do whatever it is I need to do. So I think those are all worth pointing out. Text insets actually is one more that I think is important. If you're using text insets, this does not have a list over here in the panels yet. So if you're looking for text insets, you can find your text insets because those are also absorbed into a file. Hard to see when you're scanning somebody else's work. And if you've ever got a broken text inset, the link has been broken, you can find the unresolved text insets quickly. So I think that's still super helpful. Now let's go look at the two new find and change features that were added to FrameMaker 2022. The first one is the ability to find anchored frames and assign an object style to them. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and say find anchored frame. This is an alphabetical list, so it's at the very top, and I'll click find, and it's going to locate the first anchored frame in the document. Now the colors are inverted because the frame is selected. If I click away from it and click on the frame edge, that's my anchored frame. The graphic is inside. And I've created an object style that you can see down here called FF figure frame that I want to assign to this frame. If I click it, it's going to add a blue border on the outside of the frame to help set that off. I can do them manually, of course, but I'm going to hit undo here and use find and change to do the same thing. So I'll click above the text. I'll say find the first anchored frame and click find. It finds it. And then in the change to text menu, which has multiple options down here, there is a new one in 2022 called Object Style Tag 2. A little confusing way this is worded, and I want to just address this very briefly. FrameMaker uses three words interchangeably as synonyms. They use the word format, the word tag, and the word style. It represents the history of FrameMaker. FrameMaker's been around for a long time. Initially, what I call styles were called formats, then they were called tags. Now I'm trying to always call them styles, and it seems like FrameMaker's moving that direction because that conforms with all the other page layout programs out there in Microsoft Word. But this one is really confusing because it says object style tag 2. So really that says object style 2. Anyway, just smile at it. It still works great. Click it. Oops, I missed it though. Click it. And I'm going to type in FF figure frame. So I'm saying, okay, FrameMaker, find all my anchored frames and assign the object style FF figure frame to them. Now I say all, but I only have one in here. But imagine you had 500 frames. You could either change all of them by assigning the style to it, or you could just do this selectively, find the ones you want to change. I'm just going to change this one, that's all I've got. And you can see that it's added that object style to the frame. Now, the reason you might want to do this is because if you've got a lot of anchored frames in here and you didn't know how to use object styles, maybe until you watched my last webinar on unlocking the power of styles and now you want to incorporate them, this is a quick way to assign object styles to your anchored frames. And the benefit of an object style, of course, like any other style, is it's consistent formatting, it's one-click formatting, or in this case, even quicker than one click because you can do them all with a change all. And then if you come along later and decide you want to make that line thicker or thinner or change the color for all the anchored frames in the document, you can change the style definition and it will roll through. Great feature. If you want to learn more about it, go watch the last webinar on unlocking the power of styles. It covers anchored frames. Sorry, it covers object styles. And then let's look at the next new feature. The next new feature I'm actually going to just set up here before I get going on it. In my panels on the right, I've got a lot of different panels over here. I've got the markers panel. Now there's marker and markers. Marker is where you add a new marker or edit an existing marker. Markers, plural, lists all the markers in the file. And I'm going to undock that while I'm talking so you can see what's going on there. I'll close this and then go back to find and change. Let me also back up and get rid of some of this content. That's all I need here. Yep. Okay. So earlier in this webinar, you saw me change the word vehicle to spaceship 4 times in these 2 paragraphs. What I didn't mention is that there are index markers on those words. And the index markers are currently set to vehicle. You can see that happening down in here. So I changed the words on the page, but I didn't change the index markers. And if I were to generate the index right now, these wouldn't appear under the S in spaceship, that appear under V in vehicles. So I want to modify these content of these markers, and that's that other new feature. Now I'm going to limit it just to these 4. A to remind you that you can do that, but also so it doesn't scroll while I'm talking. So I'll select these paragraphs and I'm going to say, okay, I want to find the marker of text. So I'm looking for the text within a marker of text, and I'll type in vehicle. And then I want to change it to text of a marker to. So I want to change the word vehicle to spaceship. This is for the index that's going to appear at the back of the book if I were ever to generate an index. So these words that say vehicle here, there's 4 of them because it's on these 4, is going to change to spaceship when I change all. Let me make sure I limit it to the selection and I'll change all. It says it found and changed 4. And then you can see over here that it's now changed those index markers to spaceship. That's another new feature that you might have missed. So let's move on to some of the productivity features that I find so helpful. Let me clean this up. I'm going to redock markers back over here, and I'm going to just remove the content here and set it back to document so I don't forget. Everything else I should be able to figure out as we go. All right, so inline formatting. Inline formatting is something I think you should avoid. A lot of people that are preparing files in Word add inline formatting like underline and italics and bold with the buttons that do those tasks. They don't actually use styles for it. It happens in FrameMaker too. I certainly discourage inline formatting, but sometimes people just don't know better and that's what they're going to do. So what I'm going to do is just pick some words that I want to underline for emphasis. So I'll pick congratulations and underline it, and purchase and underline it, and welcome and underline it. and then designed and underline it. Those are obviously random words, just trying to show you the feature. Okay, so when you're using the buttons up here, this is inline formatting, it's not using styles. And separately, underlines are not a good way to emphasize text. Underlines look like links to us these days. Somebody sees an underline, they try to click it and see where it's going to go. It's not a good idea. If you want to emphasize these words, underline was traditionally a proofreader's mark for italics. So I'd much rather see, if you want to emphasize these words, that you pick a word and you use a character style like emphasis italic. That's a great way to emphasize something. But what if you have a document that already has inline formatting in there? You can use find and change to quickly clean it up. So I'm going to say that I want to find anything that has an underline and eventually make it into the character style called EI emphasis italic. So I'll go to find and I'm going to pick character format. Now, character format opens up a panel, or rather a dialog box that lets me decide what I want to look for. Sometimes it comes in with content in here. Mine is actually set all zeroed out. Everything is set to as is. But as a heads up, Shift F8 will force FrameMaker to set the window to as is. Great shortcut, especially because that command doesn't live in this particular dialog box. So Shift F8, set window to as is, which lets me say to FrameMaker, all I want you to find are the underlines. I don't care about the family, the size, the angle, anything else. Just look for anything that has an underline. And then I'm going to click on set. And let's just see if it works. I'll click above the first occurrence of the underline. Am I going forward? Yes, I am. I'm just going to choose find, 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 find. It's finding the underlines. That's great. Now what I want to do is make them into my character style called EI emphasis italics. And when I open up the change to, that's not an option. There is an option to change the character format to something different. So I actually could uncheck underline, turn on italic, but that's still inline formatting. There's no option to say that I want to use a character style, but there is an option called by pasting, and I love this feature. So let me show you how that would work. I'm going to come over to documentation, which is where I use the actual style that I wanted. EI emphasis italic has been assigned here. And then I'm going to go to the edit menu and come down to copy special. And I'm going to copy the character format. Remember, format, style, tag, all synonyms. This is the character style. I'm going to copy special character format to the clipboard. And then I'm going to go back to overview, which is above all these different underlines. And I'm going to say change by pasting. So when I hit find, it finds the first underline. And when I say change, it's going to paste in the character style that I copied to the clipboard. Sure enough, it did. And if I click back on it, you can see it's using emphasis italics. I find the next one. It's not using a character style. Nothing's bold over here. But when I change it, it changes it to the character style. And I can then change all the rest. There's only 2 more. And I was very quickly able to convert inline formatting to a character style. And now if somebody comes along and they say, hey, that should be both blue and italics, I can go to the character designer, I can modify that style definition, add the blue color, and it will roll through the entire document. And by the way, if copy special and by pasting are new to you in FrameMaker, I cover those more thoroughly in the webinar on streamlining your workflow. Again, all these webinars are on YouTube. They're all free to watch. You can just search for them and watch it when you have an opportunity. Okay, so the last thing I want to cover is remove overrides, and I need to mess up this document a bit, so let me do that. I'm going to zoom out to a fit page in window view, and I'll just work on this page, that's fine. So good practice is when you modify a style definition, you update the style so it rolls through the entire document. As an example, to get your head in the game, let's say that I decide that my heading 2s, and these are, I think, actually H1 heading 1s. These are my heading 1s. Let's say I think those should all be green. What I ought to do in Paragraph Designer is go to Font and change the color to, let's say, green and update the style. And that's going to make all of my headings, all my H1 heading 1s green in the document. That's your best practice. I'm going to undo. A mistake that a new user might make that hasn't come to training yet is they simply apply changes. And update style gives you consistency across the document. When you click apply, you're going to get inconsistency. And I'm going to teach this with color because it's the easiest to see, but this works for any kind of formatting change. So for example, let's say I think maybe this one should be green. So I choose the green color and I click apply. That's an override. If you know anything about overrides, great, but if you don't, go watch the last webinar on Unlocking the Power of Styles. I cover overrides there. And then I'm going to come down to this one and say, and I think you ought to be, for some reason, who knows, orange. And I'll apply it. And then I'll do a few more things like that in this document. I'll go over here and I'll just keep changing colors randomly. Apply, and this one is going to be another color, and apply. All right. And if this is making you uncomfortable, great, because we don't want to use overrides. Looking at me doing this should make you feel very uncomfortable. It's making me feel uncomfortable. All right. So when you have overrides, you can tell because the style name has a star in front of it on the status bar in the lower left-hand corner. So that's a star right there. And I don't want any overrides in this document. And so the last thing I wanted to show you with simple search, find, and changes is that you can remove overrides. So I'm going to go over to find and change. And all the overrides I put in were paragraph level overrides. When I open up the find menu, I can search for character style overrides or object style overrides or paragraph style overrides or table style overrides. I'm just putting paragraph style overrides in. It works the same way with all of them. So if you have a coworker who doesn't understand FrameMaker and they've been clicking apply and not update style, you can clean up their files very quickly once you realize these 4 commands are in here. I'm going to go to paragraph format override. And when I choose it, it chooses remove override for me. And what page am I on? Page 5 here. So if I choose change all, it's going to find all the overrides in the document. It found 5 of them, and it's on the previous page. I'll just scroll back up, and you can see all my overrides have been removed. That's super powerful for cleaning up somebody's messy document. So let's move from a literal match to matching items that follow a pattern. And we'll start with wildcards. There's a finite number of wildcards. They're all listed here. For example, the asterisk is going to find any number of characters. Let's say for some reason you want to find every single word in your document that begins with the letter S. You could find S star, and every word that starts with an S, no matter how many characters that follow, would be found. You can also use a wildcard for spaces and punctuation, a period for any single character. A caret is the beginning of a paragraph. The $sign is the end. And then you can find actual characters or exclude actual characters by putting them in brackets, as you see here. Now, I use wildcards extensively before I learned regular expressions, and I want to show you just quickly how wildcards can work for you. I'll look specifically at the one for the beginning of the paragraph, that's the caret, and then also the pipe character, that's the vertical line. And then I do want to say that we use these in conjunction with meta characters. And meta characters are keyboard sequences that we enter into a dialog box that represent a key on the keyboard. For example, if you're working in FrameMaker's numbering properties and you want to put in an auto number followed by a tab, you probably know that you click the \T meta character because pressing the tab key on the keyboard advances in a dialog box. There are lots of meta characters. They're all listed in the FrameMaker help, or you can ask me or ask on the forums. \P, a lowercase p, represents a hard return. So on the keyboard, you might press the return key to start a new paragraph. If you want to reference that symbol, that paragraph symbol, it's \P as in paragraph. Let's go take a look. So this page looks perfectly reasonable and like it's supposed to. But what you can't tell is that the reason these paragraphs are indented is not because I'm using the style called body content, which has a first line indent, but because I physically pressed the spacebar 5 times, by 4 different times, 4 different paragraphs to manually add spaces in there. When typists give me files, they make all kinds of mistakes with the files, spacing when they want to put a first line indent in, for example, double returns instead of paragraph spacing commands. My job is to clean those files up as quickly as possible and then start the layout. So we're going to do a few wildcard find and changes to clean this file up. I was consistent with 5 spaces on each of these paragraphs, which is going to allow me to go over to Find and Change, and I'm going to search for 5 spaces at the beginning of a paragraph. Now, Shift-6 on the US keyboard produces the caret key, and I'm going to press the spacebar 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I do that and I hit Find right now, it's not going to find anything because I need to tell it it's no longer a simple search. It's now a wildcard search. And that tells FrameMaker not to look for the physical character of a caret in the document, but to look for 5 spaces at a certain location, in this case, the beginning of the line. So what I'm going to do now is just hit Find, 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 and it found all of those 5 spaces. If I have change set to none and I change all, it will remove all of those 5 spaces on those 4 paragraphs. Now I'm going to undo that. And then I'm going to make this more random because real typists do all kinds of crazy things. I put 5 in, but maybe they did 4 here and they did 3 here and they have 1 there and that one still has 5. Now this is not going to work because I'm looking for 5 spaces. So what I'm going to do is delete the 5 spaces I added after the caret and use that pipe character, which represents spaces or punctuation. So I'll add the pipe character. It's the vertical bar on my US English keyboard. It's Shift \\. And I'm going to hit Find. And it finds the 3 and the 2 and the 1 and the 5. And again, change all. We'll locate all those and take them back off because I've got the change to set to be blank. And what I should have done instead of space those, of course, is use the style that has a first line indent and signed. It looks the same, but of course it's done correctly. And a style controls that distance. Not to mess with spaces anymore. That's an example of a wildcard find and change. I also would do that with hard returns. If somebody was pressing enter, enter between paragraphs, what I could do is use wildcards to do a search for double returns, a \p. As I said, the \p sequence is 1 hard return. I want to look for 2 of them and then replace with 1 hard return. And so I'll choose change all. It should find both of those and take them back out. And then a variation on that theme that I definitely used over the years was to combine the double returns, but sometimes that have more than just 2, or maybe that have returns and spaces. And so adding that pipe character, which represents spaces or punctuation, would let me find the ones that had things in between. Typists do crazy stuff. If you can figure out what they're doing, you can usually find and replace it out. So I'll change all with that one. And again, it's found those 2 situations where I had more than just 2 returns and I had punctuation in between, or rather spaces in between. Okay, so that's a look at wildcards. They're helpful, but they're really setting the foundation to go to regular expressions. So this takes us to our final topic for this particular webinar, and that's looking at regular expressions. They're abbreviated REGEX in FrameMaker, and if you're an InDesign user, they're called grep expressions. It's all the same thing. Regular expressions, REGEX and grep are all the same thing, and the symbols are the same throughout in terms of the regular expressions. InDesign has some unique features that it adds just for InDesign documents that don't work in FrameMaker. But generally speaking, it's going to be the same feature in both. And where the wildcard table I gave you was the complete list of wildcards, pretty short, you can see them all on one screen. This is just a small subset of the possibilities of what you can put together with the regex. It's all based on patterning. And it has very powerful changes that are available that you can't get to with wildcards. Wildcards are cool. As I said, I used them for years. They were really helpful in cleaning up my documents. I abandoned them as soon as I understood how this worked. And so I'm going to start by showing you the same two things we just did using regex, and then show some more examples of how you can use these to clean things up. The categories I pulled out for your convenience, one is wildcards, and single character, just like on the other screen, is a period. But now we can specify digits and word characters and spaces, any space, horizontal spaces. We've got more locations, not just the start and the end of a paragraph. Again, these are the same characters you saw earlier, but now start and end of word and a word boundary. We can have repeat, something that repeats 0 or 1 or more times. We have matches, what happens if you want to match something. And the parentheses create a group. And what's cool about this is you can group something and then actually copy it and then use these symbols down below to paste them back in during the change activity in a different order. It's way more powerful than wildcards. So let's go look at some of these examples and see if they make sense. Let me tell you before I finish that, or before I start rather, that when I finish, I'm going to have a QR code for you to point your phone at and capture it, and it will take you to an Adobe blog, or you can download a white paper on regex in FrameMaker. It's going to have a much more complete table of things you can be putting into your regex expressions, and does a much more lengthy job of explaining how they work than I can do here. So have your phone ready. This is recorded. You can always go online if your phone isn't around right now and shoot the QR code a little bit later. So here we are back in FrameMaker, and I want to recreate the activity we just did with wildcards using regex. I've already added a number of spaces to this document. I've got double spaces between sentences, which you can see here, and then I've got 3 spaces randomly down here. I've also got double returns in here. Some have spaces in between. A quick heads up, when you see the green squiggles, that's FrameMaker spell check trying to flag double spaces. It will let you know if you have any double spaces in a document, and it can spell check them out. It doesn't flag or care if you have more than 2 spaces. So down here where I have 3 spaces, there's no green squiggle. It's just not going to even see it, just as a heads up. Now, I want to clean up this document and get rid of all this extra space. And we'll start with a very simple regex wildcard of \S. \S means space. And if you're new to regex, it feels like, well, that's probably going to be a word space. And you're right, it is. If I hit find, I have to tell it regular expressions though. So \S, regular expressions. If I hit find, it's finding word spaces. But it's also going to find returns because those are also spaces. They're just vertical spaces. So that's too broad a search. It's matching too much. I can begin to refine this expression by adding the caret to indicate the start of a paragraph. So I'm going to click on that line and cursor in front of the \S and add my caret symbol. It's the same symbol we use for wildcards. Now it's only going to find spaces that occur at the beginning of a paragraph. But paragraphs can be empty, and so it's going to find the spaces on empty paragraphs as well as paragraphs that have content. Let's further refine it by adding a very simple match character. Now, regex has a lot of match characters. It can get very complicated, more than I can cover today. I'm going to go with a very simple one, easy to understand, and it's adding the plus. And the expression I built is caret \S plus. What that means is at the beginning of a paragraph, find any spaces. The plus means 1 or more. So 1 space, 2 space, 3 spaces. We know that S is going to match horizontal and vertical spaces. I want to replace them with nothing, so there's nothing down here. And I'm going to go ahead and use find to find the, well, my cursor was actually partway down there. Let's start up here. I'll pick find. It's going to find the first one. I'll change and find. Second one, change and find, change and find, change and find. And so what I did with 2 wildcard searches, I did with 1 regex search. Just have to know how to build it. And you can be brand new to FrameMaker today and just write down this search and make sure you follow the instructions. You can do the same thing. but it didn't address the double spaces between the sentences. And again, this one has 3 spaces. So I'm going to build another expression. We know that \s is going to match horizontal and vertical spaces. So I'm going to change it to \h. H is in horizontal. This will match word spaces, horizontal spaces across the line. So it's matching 1, 2, 3. It's not going to match the return, though. It's going to jump down to the next paragraph in the next horizontal space. That's already been helpful. But I don't want to be dealing with all the individual spaces that are correct. So I'm going to further refine this expression by saying find 2 horizontal spaces, and that's going to match these 2, but there's 3 down here. It'll match 2 of the 3, unless I say 2 horizontal spaces or more. So 2 or more. And when I get there, I don't want to pull those out. So I'm going to add a space bar down here on the change. You can't see a space when I type it. I'm highlighting it so you can see that it's there. And then let's give that one a shot. I'll say find, and I will change that one and find the next one, change that one and find the next one. This is highlighting 3 of them now. I'll change that and find the next one. And I'm very quickly pulling all these back out so that I'm getting out the double returns, the leading spaces, and then a second expression is getting out the double spaces within the document. It's a good start to learning regex, but there's lots more to talk about. Now let me clean up this one more time, one last time. I'm going to assign the style for body content to indent automatically, and I want to pull out my old searches. Okay. Now before I continue, I'd like to just say that just being able to clean up spaces in a document, I think, is really important. Typists just add those random spaces. Whether you choose to clean them up with wildcards or with regex, it's up to you. But at least you have a way of getting them cleaned up quickly and not trying to manually go through them and clean them up. I think that's super important. But regex can do so much more, including changing the presentation of content. And I want to show you a couple of examples of that, and then we're going to wrap it up. So one of my pet peeves in a document is somebody who doesn't understand where to use hyphens and where to use N dashes. This is a hyphen, and a hyphen is a short dash between words. We have automatic hyphens in FrameMaker when hyphenation is turned on, but sometimes the words get manually hyphenated, and certainly people's last names can get hyphenated. That's all great. But between ranges of numbers, any place where in English you'd use the word to or through, like 1994 through 1995, that shouldn't be a hyphen. That should be an N dash. And these are hyphens. I notice that. It bothers me. And my editors know that. And that's like I'm so aware of it. They mark them up when files show a hyphen instead of an N dash. So before I start, I want to just make sure you're clear on the characters. I'll just press the Enter key. A hyphen is on my keyboard. I can press hyphen and spacebar. It's basic hyphen character. And you might not know, though, that the symbols list is at the end of the quick access toolbar, probably on your screen right now. An N dash is slightly longer than a hyphen. So you can see a hyphen versus an N dash. And because I'm going to use it in a minute, I'm just going to go ahead and copy it now so I can just use it when I need it. So I'm going to hit copy and put it in my clipboard. It'll wait there for hours if necessary. Now, what I want to do is target these hyphens in between ranges of numbers and make them into N dashes, which I've now copied to the clipboard. If I go over to find and change, and I'm on regular expressions, but find and change, and just type in a hyphen, it's going to find the hyphens, but it's going to find all of them. The one under my cursor is this one right here, so it's going to find that one, and then it's going to find the one for the numbers, and then the hyphenated name, and then the numbers, oh, another hyphenated word, and then the numbers. So it's finding all of them. And what I want to do is limit this to just digits, just N dashes that are surrounded by digits. And so we can use another wildcard for that. We know \s is any space, \h is a horizontal space. By the way, \v is a vertical space. In this case, so I want to find digits. I'll get the hyphen out of there for the moment. I'm going to find digits. And \d is the wildcard for a digit. So if I start clicking find, it's finding one digit at a time. If I want to find one or more digits, we know that we can use the plus as the match operator here. So I'll say plus, and now it can find the numbers, one or more, as it moves through the document. Let me scroll back up again. And now I'm going to say, I want to find any digits, followed by a hyphen, followed by more digits, \D, one or more. And now when I click find, it's going to find the hyphen within a range of digits. It's already super cool. I can locate them quickly now. But if I try to change them, and I'm going to change them to text, and I'm just going to paste in the end dash. So that's the end dash, just a little bit longer. If I change it now, it's going to remove the numbers and put in the end dash, which is not what I want. Now I just have the end dash. I wanted to keep the numbers and have the end dash. I'm definitely going to click undo. And what we have is something called marking sub-expressions, which is a fancy name for a group. If I put these digits into a group, and a group is simply designated by parentheses on either side, open parentheses on one side of the \D plus, close on the other, and I'll do it twice, open parentheses and close parentheses. I'm making those into groups, and the groups are automatically copied. So if I come down here now and I go in front of my dash, I can paste the first group by typing in a $sign and a 1. I can paste in the second group by typing in a $sign and a 2. And so now if I head back up here again, which is above all the dashes, I can get these out of there now because I'm done. And I find it's going to only find the end dash surrounded by numbers. And because I put them in groups, simply put them in parentheses. And I said, paste the first group, followed by an end dash and the second group. When I hit change, it puts those numbers back in again with the end dash. So now I can say, okay, find that one. Let's change and find, change and find. And you can see it's moving through that table, finding all the numbers, but ignoring all of the dashes around words and fixing it. I'll just hit change there and they're all done. So there's another example of regex that's not focusing on spaces, but on adjusting the content through the document and using regex to target specific matches. Let's go look at one where we can actually rearrange the content. So now I'm going to scroll up and I'm just going to insert some dates. I'll go to paste. And I've put in 2 dates that are using standard US date format, which is month / day of the month / and the year. And maybe I want to convert them to the Army format or the European format, which would have the day first and then the month and then the year. We can use regex to rearrange content using the skills you've already been picking up. And I'll add one more twist just because I can. Let me remove the existing queries here, and I'm going to build this so that we can rearrange these 2 sets of numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to need 3 groups because I want to keep the content but put it in a different location. So a group always is in parentheses. I'm putting my parentheses in, then I'm going to arrow in. And what I want to find is digits. Now, if I do a \D plus, that will work. I can move on. You'll feel good about it because you've seen that before. But since you've seen it before, I'm going to instead do something new. I'm going to put in a curly brace, the number 2, and a curly brace. And the curly brace is containing the number of digits, a very specific number of digits, rather than just 1 or more, which might be 2 or 3 or 4 or 10. This is 2 digits. And then it's good for me to test my expression, make sure I'm doing this right. So I'll hit find. Yep, it found it. Then I'm going to copy that because I'm a slow typist. And then I'm going to type in a / and I'll paste that in, Control V. And let's just test and make sure it's matching the first 2. Yep. Okay. And then I'll put in my /. And then I'm going to paste it again, Control V, again, saving you watching me painfully type, but I need that 2 to be a 4. And so that expression has 3 groups. Each group is in parentheses. The first group is 2 digits, then there's a /, 2 digits, and a / and 4 digits. And I want to test, so I'll hit find. Yep, and find, so it's finding those. Now, rearranging content is going to just mean rearranging how I paste it back in. 3 groups. I could paste them back in as $1, $2, $3, but that's the same order. I want to switch the order. So I'll type in a $2, and then I'll put in my slash, and a $1 and my slash, and a $3. And now I'm saying that I want to paste the second group first, and then the first group, and then the third group. And so now I will change all. I found 2 of them and changed 2 of them. And you can see now that it inversed those numbers. So as I hit undo, it had said 1027 and 1231. My redo has 2710 and 3112. That's an example of rearranging content. I hope this opens up the possibilities for you and how you can use regex to leverage editing. As long as it's a consistent pattern that you're going after, it doesn't have to be consistent letter forms. It could be just patterns. Okay, well, that was a look at how you can use Find and Change. And I'm guessing that most of you learned something along the way. If you knew it all, then that's fabulous. I love that about you. But for everybody else, there's probably some tips and tricks you picked up. We looked at simple searches, just looking for words, replacing with other words. And then we looked at lots of the various simple search variations. We had a quick look at wildcards, good to know, but then we looked at regex, and regex is all about recognizing and defining patterns. It's not looking for specific numbers or specific letters. It's all about the patterns. You can use groups, which is a set of parentheses that will automatically copy the content to the clipboard. You don't have to say, I need you to copy it. A group is copied, and then you can paste it in the same order or in a different order. As promised, there is a QR code in the lower right-hand corner of this screen. If you point your phone at it and take a picture, it will take you to Adobe's blog, and there's a white paper there that talks about regex and gives examples of regex, and it has a much more complete table than the one I put at the beginning of my regex discussion. And as a final tip, you know that the query list will remember the last 10 queries. I mentioned that early in the webinar. I want to show you what mine looks like before we go. So I'm back in FrameMaker for the final time. And if I open up my query list and look at it, it's just a useless mess. It represents things I was doing, like here's the end-dash discussion rather. Then I was trying to figure out how I was going to handle these expressions. Then I was testing these expressions. Basically, there's very little in here I can leverage. If I were super fantastic and precise at all times, it might have the last 10 developed queries in there. But the reality is, I'm thinking things through. I'm very visual. I'm trying it out. I'm coming back. That list isn't very helpful. I would really love to see the ability to save queries in a list somewhere where I can get them again today and tomorrow and the next week. Since that doesn't happen, and that only retains the last 10, after that they drop off, I just have a spreadsheet that has the queries I use all the time in there. So once I get a query working, I copy it to the spreadsheet. Next to it, I paste in what I'm changing to. I have some notes that explain where I'm using it and why. And so when I get to another situation and I'm opening up FrameMaker to use some of these queries, I just get that spreadsheet open, copy and paste it in. That's my tip for you. So that wraps up this webinar. I want you all to know I appreciate you joining me again for learning more about Find and Change and more about FrameMaker in general. Remember, on Bar Binder, we have training classes that are held online. We have custom training for groups, one-on-one coaching, and you can always find me for free on the Adobe community forums. Thanks, everybody. Bye.